Hello and welcome to I Am with Eric Faria. I am your host, and today it is my pleasure to have here with me in the studio Tim Rothschild, who is the founder of the Third Thing Network and co-founder of the Divine Movement. I got it.
You got it.
Tim?
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
So, can you just begin by talking how you got involved into, well, let's begin with the Third Thing Network, what it is and how you got involved with that.
Sure. It's actually a bigger question than you'd think
Okay.
because it involves a healing journey that I went on that started when I was 25. I'm 32 now, and I was involved. Went to college for business management and a little bit of philosophy and all that kind of stuff. And then I really got wrapped up in the business world, and I had some unfortunate life experiences that had to deal with loss, and it left me asking some of the bigger questions about life. And eventually, I had some experiences that couldn't quite be explained by Western philosophies or Western medicine. My mother was a psychologist, these kinds of mystical experiences.
Sure.
And so it led me on a path of discovery and self-discovery. And I found a school called A Society of Souls. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
Sure.
But I was following a feeling at that point, and it was like this great, joyful, exhilarating time in my life when I was exploring the possibility that anything was actually possible. And so I found a school, and over the course of 4 years, they introduced me to levels of reality that I had not been aware of. And it's a school, they say, technically for healing and awakening. And so for 4 years, with compassion and love and just this great mastery of these esoteric sciences, I was introduced to these worlds that I had no idea existed. And I was so excited, and I had transformed so greatly that I had to find ways to share it with the world.
Wow.
And it turned out, like my whole life, I had no idea that I was a creative person. But when I healed, when I was in the healing process, it never ends, I found myself wanting to be more and more creative. So I dropped sports, I dropped business stuff. I mean, still involved in business, but I became much more creative. And so I launched the Third Thing Network, which is, right now it's a podcasting network, along with a platform for healers to get together and offer their services. And we share our explorations with the world. And that's kind of, the third thing, technically. It's like held within these schools. It's like a very esoteric idea, but essentially, it's a non-dual teaching. Are you familiar with non-duality at all?
Well, I know a little bit, but for the audience that
Yeah.
might not be very familiar, what is it about?
So non-duality
Yeah.
is it's a type of consciousness. It's an attitude that you bring to life. It's all inclusive, and it's not in opposition to anything. So really, it demonstrates that everything that exists right here, right now, is valuable. And everything in the world, we can see it as information. And so me being here with you right now, there's a reason for it. There's meaning in it. I may not know what that is, because in non-duality, knowing and not knowing are two sides of the same thing.
Right.
Or I would say two sides of a third thing, And so when we're able to be awake enough to be in relationship to what's right here, right now, something magical happens. Something is created that's larger than the sum of its parts. And to me, it demonstrated a magical nature, like a poetic way that humans can actually live their lives. And it, again, since it's not in opposition to anything, it's actually conflict resolution. So it's very healing to have this type of consciousness, to hold non-duality. And so it's not in opposition to science, which breaks things down into smaller and smaller pieces, likes to make things mechanical and figure out how things work, and that's great. We need those foundations.
Sure.
But there's this other thing that I was experiencing that I became so engrossed by, and it was this magical, poetic way to live that required a lot of diligence and a lot of awareness to make sure that I was awake to what's here right now, being in reality as it is, as we say. And so when that happens, a third thing emerges, which is fresh and novel and new. And that happens, it can happen in every moment. So I dedicated myself to that sort of path, and it's supported me ever since.
Awesome. I mean, that sounds incredible. And I actually want to learn or understand how it actually manifests itself on your day-to-day life.
Sure.
Because it might sound like something that is so far away for some of the people, watching or listening to this. So how do you practice it on the daily?
Well, there's something called in the school, what I was introduced very intimately to the Kabbalistic tree of life, which actually represents all of the conditions or qualities that exist in reality, right? So it's like they've broken it down to about 10 different qualities, and these all have different relationships to one another, right? And so the beautiful thing is, the human design is actually made of these qualities. We're made of the same stuff that the entire universe is made of, And we have this ability to have self-reflective consciousness, so we can actually analyze and take a look and ask questions about ourselves, Know thyself, that sort of thing. And so there are these maps that have been given to us by our wise sages or philosophers of old, but they need to be reinvented anew every single day. So I have the map, but every day I have to walk the territory. And that's my own unique gift back to the world. Really what it is a path to understanding and awakening to my true nature, and then offering that back to life itself. And that's the process. So, I work with the maps. I work with these maps. I work with non-duality. And I work with the Kabbalistic universes of consciousness. I get that that's a whole lot of stuff, but a quick Google search will bring you to that sort of, to bring you to those maps, and then you can explore it. There's a lot of information out there, but I just work with them very intimately, and it's been a wonderful experience.
I bet. No, from what you're saying, it sounds, very, very good.
Sure.
So, on a daily basis, right? Because I just want to drill down on this for a second.
Sure.
Is there anything that you could actually give to our audience that they can begin doing besides just, going on Google and trying to search something? Can they do something that would actually bring them closer to this non-duality way of living that might be simple, and manageable for a regular person?
Yeah. I would say, the first thing that comes to mind is, the most recent teaching that I'm working with is something called the Great Bear Mother. It's called being in the clutches of the Great Bear Mother. And we all are at any given time of day. And what that means is we recognize those moments essentially. I mean, in psychology, we call it being triggered, and when we're in those clutches, something is happening here. Something is happening. And what we realize is that there's a wounding that happened somewhere along the line in our lives. And it may have been a wound that happened multiple times, but there are these woundings that occur.
Right.
And that moment that you get triggered is the very moment that wound is now exposing itself to the world.
Yeah, when somebody says something or does something to you and you have a reaction and you feel something, whatever. Yeah.
You feel that. You're in the clutches of the Great Bear Mother,
Right.
And you have a reaction, right? Yeah. Now, you could hold that reaction in loving awareness, right? And just say, okay, here's my reaction. Because remember, it's non-duality. It's all-inclusive, right?
Yeah.
So really, it's a compassionate, courageous path. So it's about being with whatever's here, inviting it all in, giving everything a place at the table. If I show up, if I wake up and I'm overwhelmed, I might pause.
Right.
And inquire about it, rather than trying to push the overwhelm away, if I find myself being frustrated. Or some people even have trouble with joy, how do they hold joy, And all of this is a way to hold what's showing up right now, again, because it's valuable, and being able to cognize something from it, being able to grab some sort of information that allows for healing to occur, and then new possibilities to emerge, because again, really it's non-dual. So what it is how do I live my life where sadness can include happiness or joy can include sorrow? And what does life look like when everything can be held in that way? And if we can't hold it, well, join the club. It's a process,
It's a process.
And so this is the process of healing and awakening. It's the process of learning how to include all of this stuff and manage it, and hold it and give it a location so that we are able to not allow these feelings become tyrants in our lives. Because, a lot of people think freedom means making enough money to say, I'm going to do what I don't want to do. I know that I don't want to do that, so I'm going to do this. But really, it's very subtle, but that thing that they don't want to do is now controlling their lives because they have to make all this money and do all this stuff in order to avoid it. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course I do.
Yeah. So in this way, I found it to be extremely magical, but at the same time very grounding because it forces me to deal with the mundane and to deal with my taxes and to do my dishes and to make that my practice.
Yeah.
And so obviously I've fallen in love with it. So I find ways to share it through the Third Thing Network, and then also, as you mentioned, with the Divine Movement.
Yes.
I can stop there,
Which is perfect. We are wrapping up for this segment, but we will continue this conversation for sure. So for everybody watching, we will be back right after this break. Hello and welcome back to I Am with Eric Faria. I'm your host, and once again I'm here with Tim Rothschild, and I just wanted to ask you about the second project that you have, which is the Divine Movement.
Right.
And can you talk a little bit about your personal history and how you came into it and how it all started?
Yeah, it's funny when you start to live a creative life, how you start to see how everything was kind of building towards this one thing, and Divine Movement is one of those. For me, because I grew up a football player, like a big athlete, like a beer drinking football player in college, frat boy, the whole thing.
Sure.
And I went on my spiritual journey a few years later, and I realized that I didn't want to exclude that part of myself. I still wanted to honor that sort of party boy that lived inside me, that wanted to celebrate life, but was also aware that a lot of this stuff were defenses from life, not wanting life to touch me in certain ways. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant, so I was trying to find a way to work with both of this, and I realized that other people are probably doing the same, and there's other people that probably have similar interests to my own.
Just maybe a few, but yeah.
So I ended up teaming up with somebody who I went to high school with. Her name's DJ Gina Turner, and she's also a yogi. And we created the Divine Movement, which has brought us around the world, providing support systems to areas that normally wouldn't have that opportunity. So the whole sciences, we use whole sciences like meditation and yoga, and I love things like numerology and astrology and those sorts of things, but I like to bring it down to a scientific level.
Right.
We don't need to get into that, but the meditation and the yoga is really what the Divine Movement's about, and we bring this to call it festivals around the world, and so that people are able to still live the life that they want, but festival life can get kind of crazy. People can drive themselves to the ground. So what we say is show up and do the work. Do the meditations, do the yoga, and see the effect that it has on your body, and then go do what you were going to do before. Because there's intelligence in these whole sciences where it meets you right where you are. So even if you stayed up all night, right, you can just come here and have a place to relax and just work on your breath for a little while. And that does something, and it allows people to have a safe space to strengthen mind, body, spirit, the whole thing. It's really an integrative process, So the company has really taken off, and so we found ourselves everywhere from nightclubs in the beginning to now larger festivals, but then giving talks and now podcasting. So it's a whole multimedia approach, but it works because it's real, and we're not in denial of the parts of ourselves that want to let loose every now and then,
I find that actually fantastic because I never thought of doing something like that, a yoga or meditation, before you go out and party.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, just the whole concept
is... It is super fun.
Yeah.
We call it open-hearted dance parties afterwards, because you've done the movements and you feel better. The energy is flowing, You're not... if you were going to have a couple beers, maybe you'll have less. If you're going to imbibe in something else, maybe you'll try something different. Because a lot of times people are coming to these get-togethers not quite realizing that they just need to escape, and they want to get out, and then they go a little bit too hard or damage their bodies. And if we show up and we do these practices, something happens. And not only that, but again, to bring the third thing back into this, third thing doesn't just mean you and me come together in a relationship and something great has happened. Yes, that does, but it's also group consciousness. You know, when people get together in a group, there's this other thing that happens where people can drop deeper into their meditations. People can drop deeper into their yoga practice and feel, you know, and so there's all that going on. So we hold a safe space to nurture that, you know, wherever the path has led us, and it's led us to some pretty wonderful places. Yeah.
That's good. So what was one of the festivals that you have done recently with that project?
My favorite one has been Holy Ship.
Okay.
So this is like the crown jewel of hard entertainment, which I think has just changed ownership after like 10 years or something like that. But, you know, so we were just at Hard Fest, which is a 65,000 person festival, you know, out west in the middle of nowhere. And we, you know, these are big, big festivals.
Yeah.
So there's a need for yoga. There's a need for meditation. There is a need, I know, because I'm showing up and there's a big line out the door.
Yeah. What is the response from the people that actually go and show up?
They love it. They love it. I mean, and it's so interesting too, because you'll get everybody from like the hardcore yogis and the meditators that like are there with their mala beads and they are ready to do their practice. And then I've got the guy who pops up 15 minutes into a 30-minute meditation, chugs his Budweiser, puts it back down, drives back into the meditation, and that's when my practice kicks in. You know, that's when I go, okay, non-duality, but you know, let's make sure we're staying on track here. You know, so it's a work in progress. But to answer your question, so Holy Ship is I'll be there again this year. 5,000 people on a cruise ship, and they have essentially maybe like 15 or 20 stages on the ship, and they just fly DJs and musicians in from around the world, and we go 5 days out into the water, 5 days back, and every day we offer yoga, meditation, healings, and I give a bunch of talks about nature of reality, which I've learned through the school, kind of giving people the structure of, you know, what they teach in the esoteric sciences, and people really love it. You know, there's a renaissance these days where people are really taking that old wisdom and integrating it in with the new. You know.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, just before we go, like the last question for this segment, why do you think that is? Because I was actually going to ask you about that. Why do you think it's coming back, something that has been there for thousands and thousands of years?
Yeah, well, I think there's a need for it, you know, and I think, you know, I just use America, for example. We came over here looking for freedom, and now we're working out our addictions. Right? So we found freedom, but that freedom allowed something intelligent to show up. And we were missing a piece of it. And so I think that what I'm trying to bring to the world is, you know, is in alignment with these old school teachings. And I think, you know, I think there's a calling for it. There's a part of each one of us that's calling for this traditional, how do I call it? You know, aboriginal, you know, whatever you want to call it. Like just, you know, the wise sage
like
teachings.
Reconnecting with ourselves.
Connection with what is,
Awesome. So this is a perfect stopping point for this segment. We will come back for the last one. So for everybody watching, we will be back right after this. Hello and welcome back. I am Eric Faria, you know the drill. So, Tim, I wanted to ask you, how do you think that people can begin to connect or reconnect to themselves or to what is?
It's a great question because, again, you know, that level of connection, right? That area of connection in the human body is actually also the seat of addiction. Psychology is just coming to this realization that the part of ourselves that wants to bring us into the world or bring something into the world or you know, have something come through us has this great desire to connect, you know, and if it is uneducated, you know, if they call it that part of us that wants to connect or create is uneducated, it'll connect to anything, right? And it won't know that the discomfort that it's experiencing right now is a part of the process, sort of what I was touching on before with the joy and sorrow being two sides of a third thing. So in order to connect, what I do is first say, let's start to bring some awareness to what we're connecting to, right? Just that if we haven't even done that yet, you know, what am I connecting to? Am I connecting to something that supports me? Is this a strategy that supports me, that brings me into life in a particular way, or is this a strategy that takes me out of life? You know, or is this a story that you know, we're humans are narrative-making machines, you know? So start paying attention to our stories about why we're connecting to these things, right? And then we can start to work with the heart, which essentially is the teacher for the part of us that wants to connect. So I would say, pay attention to your preferences. Really, it's really that simple. What do you like, right? And if you don't know what you like, then you can start there. Start practicing, start experimenting, that kind of thing. You know, so it really is a path of courage to let go of your memories of who you thought you were, and to maintain your memories, but not have your memories have you, in a sense.
I totally got that.
You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
totally got
You know,
that.
so it's a courageous path to be able to let things fall apart around you as you let go of the things that you are connecting to that no longer serve you. So again, there's a process that's taking place here. Your preferences now may not be your preferences later on. You know, we're made of the same stuff that reality is made of. The weather changes every day.
Sure.
You know, so do you. You know,
Yeah.
life is a river. So are we. You know, every 7 years the body completely recreates the cells in its body. You know, and so. All of this relates back to consciousness and awareness, and that's where I love to work, you know.
Yeah.
So that part of us that wants to connect, you know, how do we connect? You know, just by starting with that question, how, and then bring awareness to what we're connecting to, and then, you know, I would also say get some support elsewhere, you know, because we call the parts of if somebody is trying to heal and they can't figure out what they're doing, if you will, we call it the invisible obvious. It's invisible to you, but it's obvious to somebody else what's going on. So it's like the tree that grows up in a forest. They don't know, you know, what the other forests are like. You know, that's their family system and things like that. So we do need help. So hope that answers the question.
No, of course it does. Yeah. So like getting outside perspective, because that's the way that you are able to see things that you yourself wouldn't be able to see on your own.
Right.
But I want to go back to the first point that you made about changes, right? Why do you think it is so hard for human beings to change?
Oh, well, the ego, which keeps us alive, right? I'm not one of those people that says get rid of the ego, because get rid of the ego, well, there goes your life. You know, the ego is here for a reason. It keeps us alive. But the ego is paradoxical. It splits the world. This is a good mushroom, a good healthy mushroom. This is a poisonous mushroom. And it's always asking the questions, how can I be safe and how can I be happy, right? And so for the first X amount of years growing up, essentially, however, you know, I would say about 27 years, we are in like the youth portion of our lives. That is when the ego is doing everything that it can to keep us alive. So if you are in an abusive, crazy household, it's going to tell you not so bad. It's really not so bad.
Yeah.
If you, if mom or dad were very rageful, you know, the ego is going to say, you don't need to take up a lot of space. You can be invisible, and that's going to be safe. But at some point in your life, you're going to realize that the strategy is not working anymore.
Yeah, it's not serving you anymore.
I'm dating the same guy or girl that's harming
Over
me
and
over again. I got the same fight with my boss, and this is my 20th boss. Maybe, just maybe, the problem is me.
The common denominator, yes.
Yes,
exactly.
yes. So that's when the real journey begins.
Was that something that happened to you?
That is something that happens to everybody.
Yeah, no, but like, was there a specific moment in your life?
Yes, of course,
Okay.
of course, yeah. Do you want to know what it is?
Sure, yes. I'm curious.
It was several things. You know, for me, it was I would not give up. I had a serious level of body dysmorphia. I was harassed as a child. I was called fat and all these names, and so. By the time I was let out of my cage, I became like this weightlifting, college football playing maniac.
So like the total opposite. I'm going to prove it to them.
Exactly. And it did nothing for me. I'd walk in the room and I had to be the alpha male, and I didn't feel safe unless it was otherwise.
Wow.
And so after a while, I realized that I was pretty empty inside. I had a lot of outward success, but it wasn't matching up. And that's when my journey started.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, because I've had experiences also in my own personal life that I notice I'm the one who is in all of these experiences that I keep talking about, and like different situations with different people, but it's basically the same thing over and over again. It's just like a different, you know.
So there's a science is proving this right now. We learn this in schools of mysticism and in the mystery schools, and you know, so on, et cetera. That there's a holographic nature to reality, and you know, the holographic nature is metaphor and quality. That's the tree of life that I talk about. You know, and so the many-faced God, if you will, God can be a metaphor for life, wholeness, reality, whatever you want to call it, is going to keep showing up in these different ways. And the whole point is, can you see through the facade and feel? That's the key, feel. My
Yeah.
teacher says an awakened body is a Buddha body, right? So can you feel what's here? And beyond the five senses, can you perceive the truth of the situation? Because human beings, what I found, the potential is extraordinary. And it lights me up to explore this and to live into it myself, to know where I came from many years ago to where I am now. Without tooting my own horn, I'm very happy with my progress. And I see other people experiencing the same, so it's exciting to be able to offer the maps, but then the people themselves, they have to walk the territory because it's their own unique,
Yeah.
It's their boyfriend they're dating their boss, their metaphor, if you will.
I loved how you said, like, how we are narrative making machines, because it's so true. We create our own story, our own personal legend, if you will. So yeah, you can actually give somebody the map, but they're the ones who have to actually go on that quest.
Absolutely.
Take the first step.
Right.
And then the second and the third.
And the third. And I'll say this, if you don't believe in the map, right? If you don't distrust, if you don't include that distrust, include all of that in the process, right? And if what I say is going to happen at point A happens when you get there, then your trust in me will grow, your trust in the map will grow, and then you go to point B. And that's the path that I've been on. Very cautious, very skeptical, but I've found, somewhat the other side at this point, and now I'm becoming more of a teacher on that end. So it's been a wonderful experience, yeah.
Great. So would you mind if I ask you some rapid fire questions?
Let's get it going.
Okay. So to you, what is the difference between religion and spirituality?
So I would say one is a structure, right? Religion would be the structure, and spirituality is the experience. It's more experiential, right? But the water will always meet the shore, right? The flow of our life needs a structure, but too constricting of a structure, and you could call that dogmatic or fundamentalist. Too loose, and you could call that new age, or as we like to say in our schools, you're a cardboard saint, because you're all talk and you haven't walked the territory, right?
Right. Okay. Love is?
Love is. Love is, man. Do I need to say more? I mean, it's a process too, though. It's all a process. Love, I think, is synonymous with God and reality and wholeness. And I think there's different ways to experience it and everything.
Great. And I am?
Same answer. Same answer. Those are two of the most powerful words that you can ever say. As a human being, I am, and that's a process, and that's a river, just like everything else.
Amazing.
I could do this dance all day.
Yeah, no, it's one of the guests that I had, when I asked him, who are you? And he said, I am God. It was actually a very powerful moment, because I was like, huh. And then he explained it, because it might sound very presumptuous to somebody who maybe is very religious or something, to hear somebody say, I am God. But he said, I am made in the image of God, whoever he or she, it is. And I was like, that makes perfect sense. Like you were just talking about how we are made of the stuff that the universe is made of.
Right. We are the holographic projection of the universe, right? Yeah. But we still live in this narrow bandwidth that we call time-space or space-time. So there's this linear entropic unfolding. But at the same time, as we're born, we start dying. And every moment, we're dying into life, right? So there's another way to view the world where science says life and death. Great, that's a beginning and an end, right? That's true. I'm going to say yes, and you could see life as a constant stream of different levels of intensities, where sleep is 1/26th of death. And in that case, I may not know what death is like on the big death with capital D, but I know what it's like to go to sleep, and I know how it feels to end a relationship, to end something very, very painful. I know what mini deaths feel like. So at least then I can have a clue and I can stay curious, and I'm not so scared of the capital D, right?
Right. That was deep. But I liked it. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here. I could talk to you for another half an hour, if we had the time to do another show.
No, it's my pleasure.
But yeah, that was really good, and I hope that everybody watching will get something out of it and, just start their journey, because I feel like everybody has their own path to go through.
Yeah.
I'm on my path, you're on your path, and if we can help people in any way, shape, or form, might as well.
Right. Follow your preferences. It's so easy. Do what you like.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Tim,
Eric,
for being
thank
here.
you.
It was a pleasure. And for everybody watching, we will be back next week with a new episode of I Am. So thank you for watching.